Just as when we entered Mexico in 1916, 1917, after Pancho Villa's 2,000 men attacked us over the border in Arizona, we put 100,000 National Guardsmen on the border. This is stretching from California and the Pacific Ocean all the way to the Gulf of Mexico. 100,000 National Guardsmen. And we took between 25 and 30,000 regular Army troops, much of it cavalry and artillery, into Mexico. And the objective, everybody said, well, it was to capture Pancho Villa. Truthfully, it was to drive the chaos in Mexico south, away from the American border. Now, that's what we did. You have to go back and look and see how many battles we fought, how many people were killed. But the point is, that's effectively the way Russia has handled this thing. They're not interested in invading Western Europe, and I don't see any evidence that the Mexicans were interested in invading the United States in 1916, 1917. It was all an effort to restore stability and push the threat away. Why can't we sit down and talk to people? Because we refuse to accept them as equals. With this pretentious moral nonsense. I think it was Abraham Lincoln who said something along the lines of, whenever vice pays tribute to virtue, you have hypocrisy. And that's being reconstrued by Reinhold Niebuhr and a number of other learned people, that hypocrisy is the condition that exists when vice pays tribute to virtue. Well, we pay tribute to virtue, but we don't embody it and we don't adopt it. We're hypocrites of the worst kind. That needs to stop. We're living in a giant glass house. Everybody knows the truth. Let's stop pretending and let's find workable solutions, because ultimately that's what we need on this planet right now. We don't need a war of any kind that could ultimately escalate to the nuclear level. That should be uppermost in everybody's minds.
The world stands on the edge of a razor-sharp precipice. Could today's geopolitics lead us to repeat the mistakes of the past? Douglas Macgregor argues that the very same forces that shaped history may still be at play. Macgregor draws parallels between past U.S. military actions and Russia's current strategy, emphasizing that Russia's objectives aren't about expanding westward but pushing threats away from their border. He critiques the hypocrisy in global politics, calling for honest, direct conversations and urging the world to focus on preventing escalation, particularly the looming threat of nuclear conflict. As we shift from the analysis of Douglas Macgregor's insights into the broader geopolitical and military situation, the focus now moves to the critical moments unfolding for Ukraine, particularly for President Volodymyr Zelensky. In recent days, Zelensky's position has become precarious, both politically and militarily. For the first time since the beginning of Russia's special military operation, reports suggest that Zelensky is grappling with profound anxiety, driven by escalating tensions and uncertainties about the future of his country's survival in the face of mounting challenges. His latest moves and reactions, including key diplomatic conversations and battlefield developments, suggest a turning point not just for Ukraine, but for the larger international dynamics at play. Let's break down these events to understand the evolving scenario in greater detail. The last 24 hours have marked a critical juncture in the conflict between Ukraine and Russia, with developments signaling that both European politicians and President Zelensky himself are facing a dilemma about how to navigate this increasingly dire situation. Neither European officials nor Zelensky appear to have clear answers on what their next moves should be. Reports suggest that for the first time since the onset of the conflict, Zelensky is truly concerned for his own survival. His earlier demeanor, one of confidence and resilience, has shifted into something more cautious, with his recent statements reflecting the depth of the pressure he is under. The political and military landscape around him is rapidly evolving, and many are questioning how Ukraine can continue to hold the line. One of the most shocking moments of the past 24 hours came when Zelensky reacted to the fact that former U.S. President Donald Trump had reached out to Russian President Vladimir Putin before calling him. Zelensky remarked on this, stating, "It's not very pleasant," underscoring his frustration and concern that the United States might be prioritizing dialogue with Russia over its relationship with Ukraine. Trump's 90-minute conversation with Putin, followed by a mere 7-minute call with Zelensky, has left many in Ukraine feeling sidelined on the global stage, particularly in a moment when they had hoped for more unwavering support from the West. In the midst of this diplomatic shock, another significant development took place. The United States proposed a draft agreement on natural resources within Ukrainian territory. This agreement, which was handed to Zelensky during a meeting with U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, concerns resources in areas under Ukrainian control and could be signed as early as the Munich conference in mid-February. However, following the phone calls between Trump and Putin, Zelensky made the bold decision not to sign the financial agreement regarding the rare earth minerals, much to the chagrin of U.S. officials. This decision has been viewed by some analysts as a major misstep. The refusal to cooperate with the U.S. over these resources has raised questions about Ukraine's willingness to share its assets, particularly at a time when the country is heavily reliant on Western aid to sustain its defense efforts. Meanwhile, the situation on the ground in Ukraine remains extremely tense. Reports indicate that the Russian forces are increasingly encircling Ukrainian positions, intensifying their offensive with the aim of gaining full control of key areas. This is particularly evident in the region surrounding the city of Kramatorsk and the southern Donbas region. Drone attacks, including FPV drone strikes and Iskander missile strikes, have been regularly deployed by Russian forces, targeting Ukrainian defenses with surgical precision. Russian forces have also been seen increasingly operating behind Ukrainian lines, suggesting that the Kremlin may be preparing for another full-scale offensive. Within Ukraine, the morale of the troops has taken a noticeable hit. Despite the influx of U.S. military aid that bolstered Ukrainian defenses in November and December, these weapons are starting to run out as Zelensky faces the reality of limited resources, and with the pressure mounting from his own military leadership, the situation on the front lines grows increasingly dire. At the same time, reports from Ukrainian military experts suggest that over 600,000 Ukrainian soldiers are starting to question the purpose of their struggle, as these soldiers face the grim reality that they are no longer fighting for the restoration of pre-2014 borders. Their resolve is weakening. The prospect of continued warfare under uncertain circumstances has led many to doubt whether their sacrifices are worth the cost, especially when the military leadership is now embroiled in political infighting and power struggles. The announcement of Trump's call with Putin has had a ripple effect on the Ukrainian military, leading to a significant shift in morale. In response, the Ukrainian military leadership has issued a decree banning the use of mobile phones on the front lines, fearing that the proliferation of unstable information might further destabilize the morale of Ukrainian forces. The soldiers, many of whom previously believed they were fighting for their country's sovereignty and territorial integrity, are now faced with the disheartening realization that the broader international community, especially their key ally, the United States, may no longer be as committed to their cause. As the Russian military continues to advance, bolstered by a surge in national economic growth, Ukrainian soldiers are finding themselves in a battle not just with Russian forces, but with their own uncertainty. Russia's economy, which had been expected to suffer under Western sanctions, has proven more resilient than anticipated. The Russian stock market has remained strong, and the country's ability to finance its military operations is increasing. This puts additional pressure on Ukraine, which is growing more dependent on external support to maintain its defensive posture. Zelensky's refusal to sign the U.S. financial agreement may be a sign of his reluctance to further entrench Ukraine in an agreement that might not guarantee long-term security for the country. In the northern and southern regions, Russian forces have been relentless. In the north, following a brief operational pause, Russian forces resumed their clearing operations. Drones have been launched deep into Ukrainian-controlled territory, targeting military positions and vehicles, gathering intelligence, and causing destruction along the way. The Russians are methodically stepping up their efforts, preparing for what many anticipate will be another large-scale offensive, likely to take place in the coming weeks. With the current momentum, the Russians could potentially achieve their objectives by mid-April, possibly wrapping up their operations around the same time that a final diplomatic agreement is signed. The situation in the south and east is equally perilous. Russian forces have made notable progress around key locations such as Novolubka and Konstantinovka, where they are attempting to establish a continuous line of control. This would allow them to connect their footholds in the region and create a strategic advantage for future operations. Russian military sources suggest that these efforts are part of a broader plan to encircle Ukrainian forces, trapping them in a cauldron that would further weaken Ukraine's military capabilities. Despite these clear military advancements, there is an ongoing tension within Ukraine's military leadership. According to various reports, many Ukrainian soldiers are now questioning the objectives of the war, with U.S. support appearing more uncertain and the prospect of a negotiated peace becoming more real. Morale is at an all-time low. The direction of the war hinges not just on the outcome of military engagements, but on the political decisions made by Zelensky and other key leaders. If these leaders fail to find a way to unite the fractured political and military fronts, it could lead to even greater instability and possibly a breakdown in Ukraine's ability to defend itself. In the coming weeks, the fate of Ukraine will be decided not only on the battlefield, but in the halls of international diplomacy. As Russia continues to tighten its grip on critical territories, including the city of Chvar and the surrounding areas, the military pressure on Ukrainian forces is expected to intensify. The window for a negotiated peace or a decisive military breakthrough is narrowing rapidly. For now, the situation is still in flux, but what remains clear is that the future of Ukraine's sovereignty and the security of its people hangs in the balance. If you found this analysis insightful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more updates on the ongoing developments in Ukraine and the broader geopolitical landscape. Your engagement helps us continue bringing you in-depth analysis of key global events. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think will happen next in this critical phase of the conflict? We'd love to hear your opinions and predictions. Stay tuned, and thank you for being part of this conversation.